That goes through for approval, and at the same time you can do commitment checking inside here to check your request against your budget. Once it's approved, the request becomes a purchase order, and that purchase order is on your Dynamics GP system. So to me that's important because it's then inside your finance system. So any reporting you want to do out of GP includes that purchase order. From the portal as well, from the eRequest portal, we can do a goods receipt. So the goods receipt, the person has received the goods, they can put that on, and we can do a three-way match then. So when the purchase invoice comes in, we match the purchase invoice against the goods receipt, which is matched against the purchase order. You can also, if you needed to, you could just do a two-way matching process where you can match the purchase invoice directly against the purchase order. So with the purchase invoice on the system, there's the ability to send that out again for purchase invoice approval before it's posted and paid through the system. So it's optional. Obviously, if the invoice matches the original purchase order, you might want to just send it through for payments because it's already been approved at purchase order level. However, maybe if the purchase invoice, maybe there's a variance, or maybe it was over a certain threshold, you might want to push it through invoice approvals again. The invoice approval module also works with the payables type invoices. So you might get an invoice that doesn't have a purchase order, such as a utility bill or something like that. You put that through the purchase ledger process, and then that can go off for approval before it's paid as well. So that's the end-to-end process, and what we're going to do is we're going to spend about 20 minutes going through, putting a request on, getting it approved, becoming a purchase order, looking at the receivings, and within there we'll have a purchase order with two lines. One will do a receipt, the other will do a two-way match directly back to the PO, and we'll see it go through purchase invoice approvals. Just one last thing on the purchase invoice approval side of it. We can also, when an invoice comes in, it's entered or imported into Dynamics GP, we can scan or we can drag the invoice document directly into GP for it at that point. And the rules as to how it gets approved are enacted at that point. So the rules decide whether it's going to a single user for approval or whether we're going to send it up a group, a hierarchy of users for secondary approval. And inside these groups, we define how many users are needed for approval, what's their limits, and what happens after approval. So with invoice approvals, you might send it to the person who originally put on the PO up to a certain level. It will then also go up to their manager. Over another certain level, it might go up to a group of directors. And we might at that point say actually two directors have to approve it at that time to make sure it's approved. So there's a number of rules around this, but without getting into the details at the moment, let's just go through the workflow and have a look at it in action. So I'm going to go across to my browser. So like I said, eRequest is a web-enabled, it's a web portal. It's running on my local machine at the moment, so it could be running on your servers. And it needs a login ID and a password. We can also link this up to your Active Directory account, so you don't actually need to log in. It just knows who you logged into via your Windows ID. But for this demo, I'm going to log in as Angela and put her password in. She's logging into the company here. So Angela gets a home page when she logs in, which shows her any requests that she's got to action. So there's 3 requests here. Bottom one here, Claire Cox has sent her a request for Angela to approve. So we can see here Claire Cox has submitted a request to Angela for Angela to approve. She's also got 2 here, 2 requests that she's put onto the system and have been rejected. So Angela's got to do something with those rejections. Down here we've got requests that are waiting on others. So Angela's put these requests on. To Mark Hennessy, 3 of those, and 1 expense type request here for myself. eRequest has what we can do is you can define different forms inside the system. So we know that maybe putting on a request for a piece of hardware and for IT might mean that you need to enter in different details, maybe from a CapEx request or a station request or an HR request. So within the system, when we set it up, we can set up different types of request forms. And those request forms can be set up in different ways relating to what you can buy, who you can buy, what account numbers are used, etc. And at the moment, inside here, I'm saying that to filter it to show all request forms. But if I just press that filter, I can see that Angela has access to the Finance and IT request form, HR request form, marketing and events, office and equipment, staff expenses. So she can filter these views by individual request forms, just your expenses ones, by office and equipment and marketing and events, and you can see more. So if you've got typically users in a department might just have access to the request forms relating to their department. Sometimes there can be multiple request forms that they're able to access from. And those are what these filters are across here. Down at the bottom, we've also got a section here for recently completed requests. So this is where the approval dates in the last 90 days. So this is a list of requests that Angela's put on the system, been approved in the last 90 days. She might want to go back to these to print out the PO, to check on the status of the payment, or even maybe it's something that she buys often. So we just can hit the duplicate button here and duplicate that request. So that's what the recently completed requests are for. So that's the home page. Let's just scroll up to the top again, and we're going to put on a new request. So out of Angela's request forms that she's allowed to use, she's going to marketing events, and the scenario here is that we're having a customer event, and we're asking Angela to put on a request to book a meeting room at a local hotel, and to also get some promotional goods to go along with that event. So it's request number 60. It's raised today. The delivery address up here is Nolan, and if I just press on the lookup, so if I press on the expansion box here, that's the Nolan Business Solutions address that these goods are going to be delivered to. We can change that. So if you've got multiple addresses as a company, you can get this to default to your particular address as a user, the address that you want it to be delivered to, and you can also press the lookup button to change the address if you need to. Angela's in a group called Sales and Marketing. That's important because that defines the hierarchy as to who's going to approve this request. So let's go and add a line, and we're going to say we would like to book a venue. And before I could type in VN here, and it comes up with venues and accommodation. However, I'm just going to press the lookup button to show that on this particular request form, we're allowing Angela to purchase based on categories of goods. So venue and accommodations, promotional materials, and promotional gifts. It's venue and accommodation we want. And I'm going to say we need the Tower meeting rooms is the venue that she's trying to book. And the supplier, if I press the lookup button on supplier here, I can see we've got 2 suppliers. Those are suppliers that we have bought this venues and accommodation from before. So the Bloomington Country Hotel and the Scotsman in Edinburgh. The Tower meeting rooms are in the Bloomington County Hotel, so I'm going to select that. Actually, if that supplier wasn't in the list of people we've bought from before, I can just untick this link suppliers box up here, and I get to see all my suppliers on my purchase ledger within Dynamics GP. There's one thing here that the supplier has to already have been created on Dynamics GP for it to be available to purchase from. The account number is the next field down here. And what we've done here is we've put some logic into this form to say that the first segment, which is a department, needs to be defaulted based on who's putting the request on. So Angela is in sales and marketing, so it's defaulted department 100. 6410 is my normal expense code. So it's defaulted that from what I'm buying. So you can see 6410 has been defaulted from venues and accommodation, and therefore the account number it's selected for me is my 100-6410, which is my venues and accommodation account. For some forms, for some customers, we actually hide this and get it to default. So the user putting on this request doesn't even need to worry about where it's going to be, where the expense is going to be posted to. Units of measure is each, and we're going to say we want 2 meeting rooms, and they're going to cost £250 each for the day. Total price therefore is £100, it's £500, and it's gone off to Dynamics GP to work out the VAT, which has come back as 20% on that, so 20% VAT, £600 is the total amount. We require this. We're going to have the customer day on February the 21st. And I'm going to put a comment in here. Can we have 20 seats per room? Okay. Down at the bottom here, we've got some information that will be populated by GP when the purchase order is created. And we can see here that there's our budget commitment. So as Angela's putting this on, we've, in the budget, we've got £24,000 as her, as the budget amount she has to spend. Across on the right-hand side, we've got all her commitments. So value spent year to date, £5,700. Value of goods received, not invoiced, 0. Value of goods on order, 3,300, and value on non-transferred requests. We add those up, and we put the total across as our total outlay. So we're 24,000 on budgeted, 9,000 was spent or is committed to spend. So therefore we've got 62% of our budget remaining. So in this scenario here, Angela can probably go ahead and book these rooms. If that goes negative, we can put in other workflows to go and get approval of the budget, or otherwise we can't actually put this request on. So I'm just going to save that. The second line that we need for this particular event is some promotional materials. So I'm going to type in here, Pro, and it comes up with promotional gifts and materials. Actually, we're going to get some gifts, and we're going to have Nolan logo t-shirts. The supplier this time, if we press the lookup button, we can see the supplier. Normally we buy these things from Premier Prints and Promotions. So that's going to be my supplier. I'm just going to select them. It's defaulted in the 6420 account, which is my promotional gifts. I'm going to need 40 of these t-shirts, and they're going to cost me £3 each. And this time, actually, so the event's on the 21st, we better get those delivered by the 19th. And in red and blue, please. Okay, save that. That's my request entered. I've got one more bit of information that's specific to my events form down here, which is event details. That's got a little plus by it, which means it's a required field. So it wouldn't let me save this request and say into this. This is going to be 2019 customer event, and it's going to be on the 21st. So it's information I need for this request. I can put attachments against this. So if I've got a, I don't know, maybe it's a design for my logo or something like that, I can put that into here. So anybody looking at this, I just let me go and find a document to put in here. I'm just going to put in Excel spreadsheet and something there. Add the attachment. That's now put onto the system as an attachment. And if I go back to my request, we can see I've got a little 1 against attachment. So anybody approving this can see those attachments. Normally this is used if you need like 3 quotes against a request. You can add them into there. When it gets submitted for approval, anybody can look at those quotes and just check that the right process has been followed. So I'm going to submit this, and it comes up and says it's going to be submitted to Mark Hennessy, who's our Sales and Marketing Director here at Nolan's. I've also, inside the workflow, I've also put myself as an approver here. And so if Mark's away, Angela could send it to me because I'm in the same group, but it's always going to default Mark anyway. So I'm going to submit it, and it submits the request to Mark Hennessy for approval. And Mark will now get an email to ask him to log in and approve this request. So let's just go to my email here. Quick refresh. Here it is. Okay. So this is the email that's come through event 60. We can see it's the originator is Angela Barnes, and we need venue accommodation and a t-shirt. So there's a couple of ways Mark can do this. He can press on the link to go into eRequest. He can click on the approve button from the email, and that will send an email back to eRequest to say it's been approved or it's been rejected. There's a couple of options we've got there. I'm going to go into my eRequest, and I'm just going to log out, return to eRequest, and log in as Mark. So Mark sees here event 60 is the request that's been put on. Here's all the other ones he needs to approve as well. We'll go particularly into request 60. He can look at the details, he can scroll down, he can look at the commitments, make sure it's within budget, look at the attachments, make sure that 3 quotes have gone through and we're happy that with the one that Angela's selected. When Mark's happy, if he's not, he hits the reject. If he's happy, he can approve it. If it's above Mark's approval limit, or if Mark wants to submit it up for further authority, he can use the submit button here. But Mark's got a £3,000 limit. The request is 620 plus VAT, so he can approve it, and I'm just going to hit the approve button here. So that's going to create me a purchase order inside Dynamics, and it's 2 POs, 2147 and 2148. So at this point, it depends on your workflow whether Mark clicks on these links to have a look at the PO and emails them to the supplier. Angela's also had an email to say, see, there's Angela's email here saying that her request has been approved, which means that Angela, on receipt of that email, can go into eRequest, have a look at the request, at the PO, and email it to the supplier as well. So you'll see here's a purchase order number 2147, requested by Angela, approved by Mark, to the hotel manager of Bloomington County Hotel, shipped to Nolan Business Solutions, and billed to the finance department for the 2 tower meeting rooms at $250 each. With can we have 20 seats per room? So Angela can email that off to the supplier. It uses the email address set up in GP if you've got one, or you can type in an email address and subject and body and all sorts of things about it when you send in the email to the supplier. So that's the purchase order on the system now. We'll have a quick look at Dynamics GP. Go into purchasing, and we'll go into my inquiries, and we'll go to purchase order documents. I'm just going to put in PO 2147, PO 2148. We can see the purchase orders now there inside Dynamics. Bloomington County Hotel and Premier Prince Promotions. If I drill down into the PO, I can see all the information inside here, that it's 2 rooms. If I drill down even further, there's the account number that was defaulted for me, the required date, the date that the purchase order was sent. It also shows me it's requested by Angela, and any comments that Angela put on the request is sitting here inside GP as well. So that's, like I say, that now is inside your account system. So we are at this point now where we've got the purchase orders and we're waiting for the t-shirts to be delivered, and we're waiting to use that room. So I'm just going to put the recording on hold for a second and ask if there's any questions. Any purchase orders that have been raised by Angela. So here's our event 60 Nolan logo t-shirts. So Angela can enter in here that she's received 40 of them on goods received notes PP 1402. Okay, so that's the supplier's reference, the goods received note there. So when I click on the receipt button there, what the system's going to do is create me a receipt inside GP. So it's receipt 1246. And if I go back to the list, it's now disappeared off my list as an open item. Back into GP, and if I refresh my purchase order documents inquiry here, we can see now I've got a shipment here from Premier Prince Promotions 1246, which it's a work receipt in a batch called eRequest. So what this is doing is it's going to post to my expense account, £120 to the expense account, and it's going to post to an accrual account. So 2111 is my purchase invoice, so purchase received, not invoice accounts, GRNI. So eRequest has created this, but we don't actually post transactions inside GP. So the purchase ledger department typically go into the system, go into transactions, purchasing batches, the eRequest batch, run your edit list, go your processes, and post this batch. That would actually update your ledgers. Okay, so there's our Nolan logo t-shirts now on the system, and our ledgers updated with the expense and the accrual account. So now we can talk about invoicing. So invoicing happens within Dynamics GP. We're going to get an invoice in, and if the first invoice in is from Premier Prince Promotions, we go to the intermatch invoice to do a three-way match. So it's a standard window. I'm just going to put in, we've got invoice PP 1402. I'm going to put into a batch of CS invoices, 1402. It's just my convention. It could be whatever your batch convention is here. Looking at the invoice, it's from Premium Prints Promotions. And if I go to Auto Invoice, I see here my purchase order number 2148, which is my 40 t-shirts. It's going to match against that. So this is my three-way match. There's my purchase order, that's my receipt, that's my invoice on the system. Distributions are reversing out my accrual and posting to my purchase ledger control account here. Now, if this didn't match exactly, so I'm just going to think ahead a little bit here and think about going into invoice approvals later. So I'm going to say, actually, this logo was a bit bigger than what was quoted for, so they charged me £3.50 on this invoice. So GP comes up and says the unit cost of the invoice is different to the cost of the shipment. Is this correct? And I say yes. Shows me there. It's not correct. Inside the distributions, it adds the difference into my original expense account. And what it's also done inside eRequest approval is it's sent it to me, require approval by Colin Smith to be approved for that difference. So that's all gone on behind the scenes because I've got a rule behind the scenes saying it should be approved by myself. So I won't be able to post this invoice until it's been approved. The last thing that I need to show you is the attaching the invoice. So inside GP 2018, we've got this attach button, which is the documents attach. So click on that. It opens up a documents attachment window. And from my email, let me go to my emails and incoming invoices, I can take a document directly from my email and I can drag it into GP. So I'm just going to move that out of the way, go to my GP window here. I can drag that invoice onto the window here, and that invoice is now attached inside GP to be able to view it. So from here I can do a preview and have a look at it. It was actually a BT Business Direct invoice, but it doesn't really matter for this purposes on the demonstration. Okay, so inside GP then I click OK. That invoice is now attached and I can save that invoice. Okay. So an email will have been sent to me to approve that invoice now. Actually, that email gets sent on a schedule, so it doesn't get sent every time you enter an invoice on that requires my approval. You can set it up to run once a day or twice a day. So maybe I just get an email at 10 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying these are the invoices that you need to approve. Whilst we're in GP, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to say that we've had the invoice come in from Bloomington County Hotel for the use of the rooms. So I'm going to put on a two-way match invoice here. It's a shipment invoice type transaction. This is invoice Bloomington 1402. I'm going to put into a batch CS in 1402. This invoice is from Bloomington, and there's my PO2147 just going to select that. That's Tower Meeting Rooms. And there's my invoice registered there, my two-way invoice registered here. Distributions this time, because it's a two-way invoice, it's going to debit the expense account and credit purchase ledger control here. And we have the same options to do with the attach here. So if I go in, there's my attachment window. Just go back to my incoming invoices here, and I'll grab an invoice from here and drag that into that window. So that's the invoice related to that one. If the invoices come in by paper, then you could scan them to email and then drag them on, or you could scan them into a network location and attach them by drilling out to the network location from here if you wanted to as well. So that's my invoice there. Just have a look at that. That's a Christie invoice based on that process there. Okay. Just before I leave the shipment invoice, I'm just going to have a look here at the eRequest approval, and we'll see actually this one. What I've done here is I've set this one up to say this should be approved by Catherine Walsh. So that could be based on the fact that it's an admin type invoice, that it's going to the admin cost center, or it could be because it's Bloomington, or whatever rules you put in place to define where that invoice must be approved. I'm just going to save that as well. Okay. So both Catherine and I will get an email at 4 o'clock this afternoon telling us that we've got to go and approve these invoices. So again, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to stop the recording briefly. Who is Nolan Business Solutions Admin Manager. So if I go to Invoice Approvals down here, there's our receipt 1248, the invoice BL 1402, which is a shipment invoice from Bloomington for the £600. So this is our two-way match transaction. If I click on the link here, a little piece of paper, I see a list of anything that's been attached to that document. So there's the PDF. I can just open that on the screen here. And there's that Christie invoice. So Catherine can see it from this home page. She can see the invoice. She can see the details. She can tick the box, or she could just use that twisty to approve it. It's nice and easy. However, probably what we want Catherine to do is actually drill into that and have a look at a bit more detail. So within more detail, we can see information about who the supplier is, the document dates, the amounts, where it's been posted to. We can view the invoice from here as well by pressing this button. So we close that down again. We can also have a look at brief details about the purchase order, Bloomington, how many were ordered and what the extended cost was. Catherine can also put in notes. So if there was something that we needed to transfer back to the purchase ledger clerk, we can add notes in here and say, this is okay to pay. Please pay quickly as we have 10 other rooms booked. that's on the system. That builds up a history of that. We've also got history against the approval here. So if it goes through a hierarchy of people approving this particular invoice, you can always go back inside that hierarchy, the approval history, to see who's approved it before and any comments on that. So if Catherine's happy with that, she just press the approve button, and it comes back and says the invoice approval has been completed. And now it's disappeared from Catherine's list. Catherine can still get at that because we've got a view here. We were on the awaiting approval view. There's the approved view here, where here's a list of all the invoices that Catherine's approved. So here's our one that we've just approved. Yeah, so we can always go back and have a look at details from here and at the invoice. So back inside Dynamics GP, with that receipts 1248. So where am I? Okay, if I re-display it, that was the Premier. There's the invoice here. Under the notes, I can see the information that Catherine types in. This is okay to play, please play quickly. That was put on by Catherine Walsh at 2:35. At 2:35:44, she approved it, and there was complete approval at 2:35:44. So again, if it was going through a chain of people approving this invoice, you'd see the whole chain within GP against that notes field here as well. Okay. Additionally, it's marked that invoice is approved, so therefore we're able to post it. Just go back into eRequest now and try and log in as myself. And go to Invoice Approvals. Here's the Premier Print and Premier Print transaction that I need to approve. Again, I can look at the invoice. That was my BT invoice that I attached to it. That's all there. I can check the invoice, make sure that's all right. Go into the request, have a look at it, make sure it's as I expected. Within this one, I can see here the variance being posted there, the £20 variance. I can have a look at the purchase order, see the purchase order, how much the purchase order was for, how much the invoice was for, have a look at any payments, etc. So when I approve this, I can say, okay, I need to, but can do. That invoice is now approved. Back again into GP, just refresh this, go into my invoice here, and what I can see here now is this has been moved to a batch called approved. So I go in and approve that, so I can post that invoice out of the approved batch as a purchase ledger person. And again, all the notes, etc., are put against it. So once my job's done inside GP, Angela on the system, what can she see? If I log out and log back in as Angela, if Angela looks in her all requests view here, if I just actually, what I can do is I can search for 60. Right. So here's our request. I'm going to ask to show details of this. So here I can see details about who the vendor are, what items, what purchase orders. These grids on the system, you can set those up to show whatever information you need it to show. And also with these grids, you can output them into Excel. So you can create views of your data here and export them out to Excel using eRequest as well. So here it is. Here's my details view of what was on that request in Excel. If I go into the Premier Print transaction here, go into Promotional Gifts, it's filled in the purchase order number, it's filled in the receipt numbers, the receipt and the invoice, the supplier's details here. We're going to a bit more detail. See details of the transactions here, and I've also got a paid status against the invoice. So once that invoice is actually paid, it will come up here to say it's paid. What I can also do, it's not on this version, I haven't got set up in my demo set here, but I can also attach the image of the invoice here in case Angela wants to see the invoice as well on her information. So basically Angela's using eRequest. Even though Angela hasn't got a license to access GP, she can see everything about her request, her purchase order, any receipts or invoices put against it. She can look those up through the All Requests window. We've also got the purchase order inquiry here as well. So through here we can look at individual purchase orders and have a look at the purchase orders that are on the system. So here's my purchase order number 2147, 2148. Do reprints from here, look at the details. And if we actually allow them to, before a purchase order has been received, we can allow users to pull them back into eRequest to amend them and send them off again to the supplier if amendments are required. So that's the end-to-end process really. I guess coming back into my PowerPoint, we've been through putting on a request, getting it approved by Mark and having a look at the commitments, creating a purchase order, creating a goods receipt for our t-shirts, matching the invoice to the goods receipt with a difference, so therefore it went through the invoice approval, putting a purchase invoice in against the booking of the rooms at Bloomington, and again, because that was an admin type invoice, pushing it through approval to Catherine, getting those approved through the eRequest Invoice Approvals module, and now they're ready for payment proposal through standard GP and payment. To eRequest, I can go and put on a new request. And this time it's going to be a request based on human resources on the HR, where we're ordering time from a contractor. So if I go to add a line here, in this request here, I can just put on consultants, and I can put Angela Barnes for week commencing the 25th Feb. The supplier is going to be Angela Barnes, and it's posting to account number 1320 down here. Actually, let's okay. Right, so the price that Angela's going to charge us for that week is going to be £450. Okay, and we could normally make this particular field default into a 1. That's fine. So VAT is 90. We require Angela from the week commencing the 25th for a week to do training. I can save that. I can put down here some details, training on eRequest. And submit that request HR5 to Mark Hennessy. So as before, Mark would get his email and approve this request. So I'm just going to do that quickly. Here's my HR5. Approve it. And we get a purchase order number HRR00005. So inside GP now, if I go to my GP and go to purchase order entry, we can see there's purchase order 250. Raised on Angela Barnes today. The item line is a consultant, her description, and the quantity order here is 450 at a cost of £1 per hour. So if Angela charges us after the first day, or after half a week, £225, what we'd do is inside purchase ledger, once we've got the invoice from Angela, we can go and put that 250 on through here.
So you put it on. To do is the 3-by match. Can you do it?
That's the 250 recorded against that purchase order. Angela Barnes invoice 1402. CS in 1402. And there's the £250. It's probably going to be sent. No, this doesn't require approval because there's no rules requiring it for approval. So I can just save that transaction. And change them to A. And post that directly through the system. What that means, once that's done, is if we go back to Angela's purchase order, you can see inside this little I button here, ordered 450, invoiced 250, remaining 200. So when her next invoice comes on for 200, we can register that against the invoice. It would clear off the invoice then. So that's one way of doing the purchase by value type requests, which and that's the way that's most commonly used. eRequest also has the ability to put it on with quantity ordered 1, amount 450, and allow you to do within eRequest you can register separate receipts, in which case what it does is it splits the line into one line for 250, which is fully received, and a second line for 200, which is not received. Then when you put it on again, it will split that line, £100 received, £100 not received, and then the final one would go through. It's a way of doing it, but this is the most common way of doing it because it's less messy than having multiple lines on your purchase order.